Record. Welcome to the Making College Success a Reality for New York's Youth in Foster Care webinar. Today's webinar is focused on maximizing financial aid for young people in foster care. This is the fourth webinar in a series of 5, and we are really going to focus on how you all can support foster youth with attending college and ensuring that they have access to the financial resources they need to be successful. My name is Jessica Maxwell. I'm a consultant working with the Children's Aid Society. I support the guide development, promotion, and the webinar creation. I've worked in child welfare policy and advocacy for over 10 years, and I'm passionate about empowering young people with lived experience to take a seat at the table and support decisions that impact their lives. I currently live in Los Angeles, California, and I work on education issues impacting the system-involved scholars. I'm excited to have 3 presenters with us today. The first one will be joining me is Kenneth Curton. He is the program manager at the New York State Office of Children and Family Services and focuses on higher education and transitional service initiatives that support youth in foster care. He also is the education training voucher coordinator and has more than 10 years of experience in youth development. Ken is dedicated to ensuring all youth have the resources and skills they need to transition successfully into adulthood. Welcome, Ken. Next, I'm proud to present Zalika Daniel, who is the Deputy Director of Financial Aid and Compliance at CUNY's Central Office. She has held several financial aid positions at higher education institutions, including at CUNY's Hunter College, where she served as the Financial Aid Director. Her office is responsible for awarding and compliance of federal, state, and institutional aid programs for CUNY's 27 colleges, awarding over $770 million in need-based federal Pell Grants and New York State awards to more than 170,000 undergraduate students. Welcome, Zalika. And last but not least, I'm pleased to present you all Osei Ajamin, who has a dual role with the Office of Opportunities at SUNY Central Administration. As a campus liaison, he works with the EOP directors at the Colleges of Technology to ensure proper fund management and efficient program execution to support all EOP students. As SUNY's Foster Youth College Success Initiative Coordinator, he works with the New York State Department of Education, OCFS, Children's Aid, and SUNY Central Administration, as well with SUNY Central campuses to manage funds and execute college success policies that impact all current and former foster youth who are attending SUNY. Welcome, Osei. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank all of the people that helped to create the guide and make this guidebook successful, including those as a part of the Making College Success work group at Children's Aid, New York State Education Department, the Higher Education Services, CUNY, and SUNY. A quick housekeeping rules. So everyone has been entered into listen-only mode. If you have questions, we ask that you use the question and answer feature to ask your questions. Please refrain from using the chat box. We will monitor questions and address them at the end of the presentation during our live question and answer portion. This presentation will be recorded and posted on the College Success Resource Guide website, and all of the slides, the materials that we mentioned today, as well as any unanswered questions, will also be posted on the website. We will do a quick overview of why it's important to make college success a reality for New York's youth in foster care. We will then have a presentation from Ken where we talk about how to identify foster youth in the direct terminology of foster youth. We will then have a financial aid 101 presentation from Zalika around the financial aid resources available to foster youth and how to package students. And lastly, we will have a presentation from Osei on improving access to financial aid. Why we need to make college success a reality for New York's youth in foster care. For us, education is a pathway out of poverty. Research shows that education really increases one person's lifetime earning potential. Foster youth deserve every opportunity to thrive just as we would want for our own children. Being in foster care challenges educational stability of young people from the time they enter into foster care. 31 to 75% of foster youth change schools upon entry into care. School mobility increases with age. 34% of 17 and 18-year-olds in foster care have experienced at least 5 or more school changes. Data shows only 3 to 11% of foster youth may graduate from college. While we believe this number is higher in states like New York and California, there's no recent data or research to show otherwise. Surveys have shown nearly 90% of foster youth endeavor to attend college. However, the daunting financial aid application processes and concerns about paying for college often dissuade them. Today's webinar highlights what you can do to ensure foster youth are able to access the maximum amount of financial aid they need to cover higher education expenses. The College Success Guide is a tool designed for you all, folks that are working in higher education space, child welfare, or students themselves, to understand the resources and tools available to support foster youth to attend college. The guide can be found at www.fysany.org/college-success-guide. You'll be able to find specific information about financial aid in Chapter 3. We encourage you to explore all of the tools and all of the 6 chapters in the guide, and more specifically, we encourage you to get acquainted with the student testimonials that introduce each of the chapters in the guide. As a quick reminder, you can use the Q&A feature to submit questions. So, who is a foster youth for financial aid purposes? A foster youth, by the federal definition, is defined as any young person that has spent any time in care after the age of 13. This includes students who were subsequently reunified with their birth families or who were adopted after their 13th birthday. A special note about the funding for the Foster Youth College Success Initiative, which is a statewide program, is that students who are without lawful immigration status or undocumented and fall within the category of eligible foster youth, meaning they were in foster care after their 13th birthday, are eligible to receive funds through the Foster Youth College Success Initiative, even though they may not be able to receive federal and federal grants. So, a couple of quick things that come up in terms of student scenarios in their time in foster care. We have a couple of student scenarios that we'd like to go through today. A lot of questions come up about who's an eligible foster youth, and so we provided a couple of scenarios of the foster youth or ward of the court, ward of the state definition. So this first scenario is Scott, who lived with his foster parents from the age of 8 until he was 18. He was kicked out of his foster home after he graduated and went to live with his birth mother. Scott is eligible as a foster youth and does not need to submit his birth or bio parents' information on his federal FAFSA. Our next student scenario is Brad. Brad was in foster care from the time of his birth. His foster parents adopted him at age 12. Because he was adopted at age 12, Brad is not an eligible foster youth because he achieved permanency through adoption prior to turning 13. In New York, we often get a lot of questions about students who are in informal guardianship arrangements or in a program called kinship guardianship. When youth are removed from their homes and placed into foster care with a relative or a kin as defined by New York state law, this is known as a kinship placement. These families become certified foster care providers and will be under the supervision of a local child welfare agency. Kinship families also may apply to become legal guardians of their young people in care. If legal guardianship status is pending, students are still considered to be eligible foster youth or wards of the court, and therefore are eligible to claim foster care status for financial independence from their family, as long as this happens after their 13th birthday. I will now like to pass it over to Ken to provide you more tips and strategies about identifying foster youth.
Good morning, everyone. So I will be discussing some tips and strategies that can be used to help serve and identify foster care youth. It's very important to identify foster care youth early when they attend college. And this is important for many reasons. It's important because there are tons of funds that students may be eligible for due to their foster care status, some funds we're going to talk about on this call. So one of the ways that you can first help a student is to gain awareness about these funds. So all of you are doing the first step today by being on this webinar, and there's tons of other webinars that were had that really break down a lot of these fundings. So a way that a college can identify foster care youth is by including a foster care identification question on the college admissions application. I know some colleges have implemented that, and it has been very helpful to many colleges so that they can identify these students for these particular funds that they may be eligible for. Another strategy that colleges have used is to use the FAFSA form question number 52, which asks if a youth was in foster care after their 13th birthday. So that is another way to identify youth that were in foster care in your school. And it's really important also to implement a targeted communication effort to reach identified foster care students. I have found that many foster care students may not feel comfortable self-disclosing that they were in foster care. So it's important to have a conversation with the youth in your school from a strength-based perspective and let them know that by disclosing their foster care status, it could potentially open the door for some funds to help them with their college process. So there are two funds that I was talking about that foster care youth may be eligible for. One is the FAFSA, Foster Youth College Success Initiative, and another funding is the Education Training Voucher. As far as FISA, a youth had to be in foster care at the age of 13 and after to be eligible for these funds. They must be attending a SUNY school, CUNY school, or a private college with a higher education opportunity program. If the youth meet these criteria, there is a consent form created by OCSS that the youth may fill out and send to either their school or the OCSS address on the consent form. And this will be a way for OCSS to identify if they are indeed an eligible foster care youth for these funds. But there is a separate webinar that was done that I know it should be posted that goes through this funding. So it'd be really beneficial to go and check out that webinar regarding the FISA funding. As far as ETV, I'm the ETV coordinator for New York State. I will be, after this, posting the ETV application as well as my email address if anyone has questions. But for the education training voucher, a youth must apply for ETV before their 21st birthday. They can receive the funds up until their 23rd birthday. As far as the foster care eligibility, the young person had to be in foster care at 14 and after. If they were adopted, they had to be adopted after 16. And these funds is up to $5,000 for the academic year. So it could be very beneficial to a lot of students. As far as how to apply, there's the address, the website that I will be posting. And once a young person fills out that application, our vendor, Welfare Research, Inc., will verify with the school the cost of attendance for that particular student. Once that is verified, a determination will be made on how much the student would receive for the academic year or for that semester. But in addition to the cost of attendance that they receive from the school, the youth can fill out a budget sheet that is attached to the ETV application, and that budget sheet can include could include other information such as transportation. Do they have a car expense? Do they buy a Metro card? Do they pay rent? How much is that? And once all of that is added together, a determination is made depending on what was established if the funds may go to the college or may go to the student. So the application is now open starting July 1st. A youth can now apply for fall funding. So we do ask, if you know eligible students, to have them go to the website and apply. The next thing we're going to talk about is the child welfare funding. So youth currently in foster care are eligible to receive child welfare funding that may assist with the cost of room and board. There is no standard rate for students in New York State. Instead, the payments are based on the student's county that they reside on. The county can use the foster care rate that they pay for a foster home. The local district of social service can pay up to the New York State approved foster care rate. The New York State approved foster care rate is on the OTSS website. It changes every year, so I suggest that many of you check out that rate because the county can pay up to that rate. Also, there is a room and board template form that was created that is attached here to this webinar that can be really useful for colleges and child welfare agencies that have decided to pay this room and board cost. And if anyone has any questions, I will be submitting my email address. And also at the end of this webinar, please feel free to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken. That was super helpful. So I would like to just take this a moment to remind everyone, please use the Q&A feature to ask any questions of the panelists. We will be collecting the questions and we will have a live Q&A at the end of the presentation where we'll answer your questions as well as posting the questions on the College Success Guide website afterwards. Now I'd like to pass it over to Zalika Daniel from CUNY to talk about financial aid.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So we're going to be talking a little bit about financial aid and some of the things that students in care may have as concerns. These are vulnerable students, students who are often not sure of themselves walking into this new environment of what college offers. And so some of the considerations that we can give when handling the students, especially in financial aid and student services, are, with customer service, such as the use of acronyms. We throw around terms loosely like FAFSA and TAP and EFC. And I think part of the narrative in speaking to a student can be that we're, of course, using these terms because we want to familiarize students with what they are and have them, learn this new language that's going to follow them through the next 4 years of school. But we also want to give them explanations of what these things mean and empower them. So in part of the customer service consideration is to make sure that students are being given the terms and the meaning behind the terms when we use it loosely. So I think just being patient in that sense and giving that further explanation could be helpful. The other thing that we'd like to see happen is that when students who are, again, vulnerable, needing help, any student, regardless of whether they're in care or out of care, that referrals to support programs are utilized. At CUNY especially, we have so many different programs that work to support students who are going through any myriad of different issues. And so I think referring a student directly to a support program, and even better, doing a soft transfer or a handoff directly to a staff member, as opposed to saying, go down the hall to room 203. There's a difference in having that student know where they're going, using the names of the offices that they're going to, maybe even doing, again, a soft handoff directly to another staff member, knowing that, the halls are large, there's students looming, they're nervous, they're not quite sure, maybe they didn't understand what you said, maybe they didn't write it down. So these are some of the considerations I think that we should use when dealing with students. So to initiate the financial aid process and the filing process for students, in general, students need to apply for a FAFSA application. And for students in care, and foster students, if they answer yes to question 52 on the FAFSA, when the ISER is received, we will note that those are foster care students possibly. That foster care status, as staff members and financial aid knows, gives the student an independent status. And that means that the FAFSA can be completed without any parental information, without any information for their guardians, whether they're legal guardians or foster care parents. It's solely on the student's income information. One of the things that may happen is that the student may be selected for federal verification. And federal verification is the process that basically stops everything until the student submits proof of their status. It could be income information, it could be a verification worksheet where the student is asked to explain how many family members live in the home. It could be proof of their in-care guardian status. So all of those things might be selected, but also depending on the program, if a student is going into an opportunity program such as EOP or HEOP or SEEK or CD at CUNY, there are another round of verifications that a student may have to go through, at least in the initial stage, to get into the program. And so I think in using the word verification, has to be a delineation between federal verification and program verification. And in explaining to the students, understanding that federally you may have to be verified, but institutionally for the program that you're looking to get into, there may also be a set of requirements, and just giving the students the differences between that will help empower them. So when the ISER information is received, the student, being, let's say, independent, will then get a budget assigned, and the budget or the cost of attendance is assigned to the student based off of their enrollment, whether it be for the academic year or for the semester, based off of their living status, if they're living on campus or away from campus, with parent or without parent. Foster students tend to have an independent status, which then gives them a living away budget at CUNY, as what we call it. And the living away budget will obviously be a higher cost that's going to have living costs associated with it for someone who has to pay for rent or for dorm, a higher food cost, because they're truly living without any other forms of support. Whereas a student who is an on-campus student, or not on campus, but living at home with a parent per se, or living in a household that's supported, has a much lower cost of attendance. By having an independent status, a student has a higher cost of attendance. By having a higher cost of attendance, a student can receive more aid or have more room for need-based aid and other types of awards if necessary. As you all know, those in FA know that a cost of attendance is made up of direct costs and indirect costs. Direct costs that are charged to the student on the student bill, such as tuition and fees and housing if they're living on a dorm, and also indirect costs of food and books, supplies, medical insurance. All these things are indirect costs that may not be paid to the institution, but they go into the cost of living. Often in in-care students, they're not given a cost of attendance that will spread over the summer months. That summer period of enrollment is usually a sticky period in terms of the student is not taking classes in the summer. They may not have any ability to be awarded during that period of time. It really depends on the program that they're in. At CUNY, we have a number of programs that help support our foster youth that are in the summer. However, in general, the student will only get a cost of attendance for the period of months that they're enrolled in school. Students can go through what is called a professional judgment if they have extra expenses. And in a professional judgment, which is also known as an income adjustment, financial aid offices will ask for lots of documentation to support changes that have happened in the household or with the student's circumstance, such as unemployment, death of a spouse, if there's such. Those are some of the popular ones that are done. And then what we do is reconstruct the income that's listed on the FAFSA application in order to come up with a different, possibly lower EFC for the student. It's not guaranteed. It's not automatic. It is truly the professional judgment of the reviewing office and the reviewing officer. And so it can't be forced, but often when it's something very cut and dry, such as unemployment, if the student has a certain period of time of not having any funds received, we calculate what that income is and restructure that to put in a new adjusted gross income, to calculate a new taxes paid, to calculate a new wages and what the student could expect to earn for the rest of an academic year. So here is just a sample of the average cost of attendance, and we do a comparative between CUNY, SUNY, and a private institution here in New York. You can see the tuition for both CUNY and SUNY are relative. The private institution's a lot more. And then the fees that are charged to the student as well. Those are considered the direct costs as mentioned before. The housing cost for the student may be considered a direct cost or may not be. It depends on whether or not the student is actually in a dormitory that is owned by the campus, or if they're in an off-campus dorm or off-campus apartment. That's still an added expense that's added into the budget. There's books and supplies that's on average probably based on full time. There's meals that are structured in transportation. And yes, we know that students that are living on campus may not need transportation, but you still have to get around for labs or, you know, to work part-time, whatever it is. So all those things are structured into the cost as well as personal expenses. So for CUNY specifically, a student would have a $29,850 budget, meaning their total aid cannot exceed $29,850. And that's aid from all sources. So that's federal aid, institutional aid, state aid, private monies, even monies received from an outside organization, ETV. All of that cannot exceed that master cost of attendance top. And for SUNY, there's the slightly lower, it's $26,650. And for the private institution, you can see the difference of $62,433. I think what's important to note when looking at the differences in schools, in-care students should not be, you know, prohibited by applying to a private institution. Lots of private institutions have supporting programs, lots of endowment, lots of merit-based funding to award to these students to help them afford college. And so it will depend on a school-by-school basis how they will package the student accordingly. So with packaging, as I just started mentioning, at CUNY specifically, we package students looking at obviously what is their need. Our costs are relatively low, and students who complete a FAFSA application who receive Pell, eligibility for the Pell Grant, will receive that first because it's entitlement funding. And entitlement funding is such that if a student is Pell eligible, they're making all the other requirements such as meeting their satisfactory academic progress, enrolled for the proper amount of units, have the EFC that connotates with that, taking courses that are matriculated towards their degree, the student will receive the Pell Grant, and it's slated based off of the enrollment. So it can be a different amount at 12 credits, which is considered full-time or above. 9 credits is 3/4 time, 6 credits or above up to 9 is considered half-time, and then less than half-time, which is less than 6 credits. The other thing that we package students with after we package Pell would be any New York State aid. So CUNY especially partners very well with HESC, which is the Higher Education Services Corporation of New York, to award state-based funding, such as the TAP grant, and they also have the Excelsior Scholarship. There's also funding available for students who may be attending part-time, like the Aid for Part-Time Study Award that is usually institutionally awarded. And so students may also get that, or a myriad of other state scholarships, depending on their high school performance or what they're studying, to help them fund attending school. And then we also will then package students after that first costs are met between Pell and TAP with any institutional aid that is campus-based discretionary aid, such as the SEOG grant, which is a supplemental grant that students may or may not receive. At CUNY, we award maybe about $500 per semester or so, depending on the student. Federal Work Study is also another big campus-based award that we offer. And for some students, this is a great way for them to get acclimated to campus, get an opportunity to make friends, and usually work within the confines of their school schedule. So it's not with the same pressure as having to work when you're working at an a store, an outside private entity. Usually when you're working work study, it will flow with your school schedule. So it's important to note that when students are packaged, they're again getting Pell first because that's entitlement money. They have to get it if they're eligible. And then if there's New York State aid to be had, which will come with some requirements in terms of GPA, in terms of progress, the student needs to be passing a certain amount of credits attempted. They need to have a certain GPA in order to keep the awards. All this information for financial aid staff are well aware, and students are made aware of it also by either visiting the websites. We have this information also on the CUNY website, and every college, I believe, that has their packaging methodology, not necessarily the methodology spelled out, but they will have the types of institutional aid that they offer, the types of federal aid that they offer. Some may offer their cost of attendance, which is mandatory to show that. So there's lots of information to be had if you're helping a student who's in care trying to figure out next steps and affordability with college. Visiting the websites is the very first step. The other big thing that is the animal in the room usually is direct loans. Students automatically do not get packaged with direct loans at CUNY. However, some institutions do auto-package students with federal direct loans, which may consist of subsidized or unsubsidized loan, depending on the student's situation, their need, their cost of attendance, and such. If a student needs to borrow, it's never good to borrow if you can get out of college without doing so. Of course, we encourage that highly. It really is up to the student, and the student will need a lot of guidance in terms of determining whether or not borrowing for that institution is something they'd like to do. So the student will really need to review that with a counselor if there's anyone to help them work through that process. And students shouldn't borrow unnecessarily. That's a very important fact. This is an example of a CUNY package that we give for a student who's non-dorming. So this was directly a student that is in the program. You'll see that there is the Pell Grant. We divided between fall and spring. There's the SEOG award there. This student is actually a CARES Act student from the COVID-19 situation, and we received federal funds to disperse that among students. There's the Federal Work Study Award for the student. There's a TAP grant. There's a TAP waiver. There's CUSTA that we give. This means this is an upper class student about to graduate because we give them a gap funding from CUNY. And there's also a New York State Youth Matters Award that's individual to CUNY for $1,500 as well. So the student has the total package of $20,000, and the direct cost for tuition at CUNY is about $6,000. This is an example of a dorm project student. So at CUNY, we partner with ACS to have a foster dorm project. And this is to give students that are in foster care a space in the dorm that's covered by New York City's ACS department. And so the student will get all their federal aid and their state aid as they're eligible to receive, as the prior student had. But you'll also see at the very bottom a participating youth gap award of $14,304. That's direct funding that CUNY and ACS is actually awarding to the student to cover their dorm costs. So the student, as you can see, is not borrowing any kind of loan of any kind. Their total awards are $28,479. And remember, when we looked at an earlier slide, the cost of attendance maximum was about $29,000. So the student is about $500 shy of their full budget. If they wanted to take any other money out or get any other funding, they could only have about a $500 award gap.
Thank you so much, Zalika. That was super helpful information. Again, I would like to remind everyone, if there are any questions that are coming up for you while you're listening to the different presentations, you can feel free to use the Q&A box to submit your questions. And if there are questions specific that are direct to someone, whether it be Ken, Zalika, Ose, or myself, you can feel free to also just direct those questions to us and we will respond to them during the live Q&A. I'd now like to pass it over to Ose to talk about packaging foster youth at SUNY.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to go through just pretty much just a few tips on packaging of foster youth. My colleague pretty much, broke down very, very specifically, just the different forms of aid and everything. So with that going on, just some specific strategies that you can use to maximize the funding for a youth that's in care. So if some of you remember the last time in the presentation, I kind of start off with the why. And the reason why I start off with the why is because I like to kind of introduce what I call purposeful packaging. I know you all, do that continuously, but just the reasons for packaging a foster youth a certain way. So some key factors that a foster youth are dealing with is transitioning out of care. There's a lot of different entities kind of going on with that whole process. The uncertainty of identifying or not identifying as a youth in care, eliminating, kind of the stigma. Also, health, mental health, physical health, financial barriers, food security during breaks, acclimating to student life, lack of parental and guardian support, and stable housing during the intercession period. So these are some of the things that we're kind of, that a youth in care would be dealing with. As we go to the next slide. As you all, a lot of you already know what the Foster Youth College Success Initiative covers tuition and fees, books, transportation, housing, inclusive of recess housing, which I'll talk about a little later, on-campus tutoring. It's not meant to supplant already free tutoring for a student. This is additional. Any type of technical equipment that a student may need for their education, for their labs or for anything that needs to be done computer-wise. Personal expenses, making sure that, all the surrounding things that are there are covered. So we'll talk about a little further down the line, the cost of attendance, the formulas, and how you can kind of make some adaptations in that particular area. Also medical expenses, keeping that in mind as well. And also behavioral health, vision, and dental. All right, so now we're gonna kind of go into a little bit of packaging for foster youth. So I know that there is pretty much a general formula that's followed in doing that, but consider even within the formulas increasing the budgets for additional expenses that are often incurred by a foster youth. Cost of attendance, academic support, supplemental housing. So when you think of personal expenses, kind of think of it from a broader standpoint. There's some things that a foster youth may need that may be provided by traditionally by a parent that they may not have readily available to them. Factor in those expenses. Sometime it may be usually a little higher than what's allocated in the cost of attendance. We talked about technology, medical, food, housing, also talking about the intercession housing in between breaks. Someone who has a home to go to, has a place to go to, in between the breaks, but a foster youth a lot of the time are faced with a situation where they kind of have to figure out where they're going to stay in between breaks. Now they want to keep this information, confidential, but they need a place to stay. So it's very, very key in between the spring, winter breaks, even during the summer, make sure that when you're packaging that all that can be included within the packaging. Sometimes there is an amount that you're dealing with, but please deal with expanding the amount. And even if additional funds may be needed, please keep that in mind. So one strategy some campuses use is meet with your students, if you can. EOP foster youth students actually have guidance counselors. EOP counselors to work with them, continuously about, their needs. So EOP, Foster Youth College Success Initiative, have their EOP counselors, but non-EOP don't have those resources. So they may need to, meet with somebody from the financial aid office to talk about their expenses. So what some campuses actually do is meet with these students and have a template for what they think their budgets will be for that particular semester. You can put together a template, talk with these students and kind of figure out what are your expenses, what do you actually need for this particular semester or this particular academic year, and kind of work on that. Some volumes are larger than others. Some have that resource. It'll be easier for you to do, and then some it may be a little more difficult. But that's some strategies that some campuses have used as far as finding out what the expenses were needed so they can apply it to the packaging. Also, consider other, scholarships and grant opportunities. The College Success Resource Guide, Chapter 3. Please, utilize the resource guide. It has a lot of grant opportunities and scholarships for students. And also what we mentioned earlier, please, think about the flexibility, increasing the budget for additional expenses during the academic year. And like I said before, some ways to do that, to give some reasoning behind it, is meeting with the students to kind of go over what their budgets may be. Now, we don't want to have so much where we condense it down to be so cookie cutter, because each youth has a different situation. That's why kind of having that dialogue with the students is very, very important, so that the students can get the aid that they need. Also, what's tremendous and huge, we don't want any students with funding available to leave with any debt. So, replacing student loans with the Foster Youth College Success Initiative funds. And also, just kind of keep in mind that these students are used to advocating for themselves. So some may really, reach out to you persistently, and then some may not. But just to keep in mind that that dialogue is very important to assisting youth in care, because they've overcome tremendous odds to be in this situation. And what we all want to do is make sure that they succeed and they lack nothing, in reaching their goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. That was extremely helpful. We will now move on to the webinar evaluation and open Q&A portion of today's webinar. For everyone to take a moment to please participate in our webinar evaluation. There are 3 simple questions. The first one is, please rate your satisfaction with today's webinar. The second one is, how likely are you to access the college resource guide in the future? And the last question is, will you share information about the College Success Resource Guide with your colleagues, staff, and partners? So we will give you a moment to answer that question. And while you are doing that, we will begin to respond to the questions that you all have submitted through the live Q&A. Maria, can you please read the first question?
The first question is, how would we know if an undocumented student qualifies if they don't file the FAFSA, as they do not qualify for federal aid?
Great question. Thank you, Maria. I'd first like to say that we encourage all financial aid officers to ask students if there are any particular scenarios that impact their ability to access financial support to pay for college. And we also encourage financial aid officers to directly ask students if they have foster care experience, given that there are so many specific resources and particularly aids and grant awards for foster youth. I'd also just like to position this question to Zalika or Ose to discuss how your institutions support students or counsel students, undocumented students, in accessing financial aid, or specifically how you handle supporting students around the DREAM Act.
So I will say that CUNY probably has in the state the largest population of undocumented students. And with New York State's rollout of the DREAM Act, we've partnered very well with HESC to facilitate having our CUNY students who may fall into the bucket of being undocumented apply. And so students are encouraged, if they're New York State residents and you have the DREAM Act in New York, to apply through the HESC website for the Senator Jose Peralta DREAM Act application. Within that application itself, it will ask some questions for the student. They'll have to submit proof of when they graduated from high school. And then the student, provided they meet all the other questions, will come in on the file exchange that we get from the state with other state awards. The state will make the full determination whether or not the student is truly eligible, and they'll ask for the income questions. So at CUNY, because we not only partner with the state for the Peralta Act, the DREAM application and the DREAM Act is actually extends to HEOP, EOP, SEEK and CD programs at CUNY. And so our undocumented students can have state funding if they're not going to be eligible for federal funding, program funding as being part of their program as well, whether they're in the ASAP program or the foster youth program or the SEEK program. They'll also qualify for program benefits.
And pretty much Alika just seamlessly, explained pretty much the whole process. So it's pretty much the same way, we try to handle it that way, and then also like a case-by-case basics, but she pretty much broke down how pretty much it's handled systematically.
The next question is, are non-HEOP students allowed to participate in the Foster Youth College Success Initiative program?
Thank you, Maria. So that is correct. At private institutions that currently operate an HEOP program, foster youth that are attending that campus or university can participate in the Foster Youth College Success Initiative, whether or not they are enrolled in the HEOP program. The only indicator is that it has to be an active HEOP program, because grant funding flows from the New York State Department of Education, and they are only allowed to contract with HEOP institutions. But a student does not have to be enrolled in HEOP at a participating institution.
The next question is for Zalika, and it says, can you speak a little more about the Excelsior Scholarship in regards to youth in care? How applicable is this for youth in care?
There's no distinction between a youth in care and a non-youth in care receiving the Excelsior Scholarship. If they fall within the income guidelines that's stipulated by HESC, I believe it was no more than $125,000, the student is eligible once they meet the academic criteria. So there really is nothing precluding them from having it. Know that for the 2021 year, the application is not yet opened, but for students who were in any prior years who received the award, I believe they're being awarded as well. Moving forward. So there really isn't anything that stops the student who's in care. There's nothing that will stop them from having the award other than their own academic performance. When a student gets the Excelsior Scholarship, they're expected to complete 30 academic credits towards their degree every academic year with, full-time enrollment, usually anywhere between 12, but preferably 15 credits per semester to finish timely within 4 years. And they have to meet other state requirements, such as declaring their major upon 60 credits, passing all credits attempted, making up credits possibly in the summertime if they're short, and they can be allowed to transfer into the program, but they would have had to meet what is the Excelsior cohort chart of credits, earning 30 credits per academic year. So if a student transfers in and didn't have Excelsior for the first 2 years of school, upon that third year, they need to be at 60 credits in order to qualify for Excelsior.
The next question is for Ose. It is that someone emailed their Foster Youth College Success Initiative roster and consent forms to fycsi@suny.edu. And the person would like to know, will they get a confirmation that the roster was received?
Yes, ultimately. What's happening is, I'm getting all of the that's me pretty much. I just want to reveal. When all of them are in, we'll send basically a confirmation out to campuses. Basically, these are the students that you have submitted for funding. So we're going to wait past the deadline. We're going to get everything forwarded on, and then you will receive something, a confirmation letting you know that I've received all of these particular students.
The next question is for Zalika, and it is, what is a TAP waiver?
The TAP waiver is an award that is specific to CUNY. I believe SUNY may have it as well. Years ago, when the TAP rules were written into law, it was based off of one rate of tuition. At the time, it was 5165, I believe, was the rate of tuition at that time. And since then, the institution has raised the tuition, because now tuition is about $6,300 and some odd dollars per academic year. And so the TAP waiver fills the gap between the 5165 and the current rate of tuition.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to just give you all a reminder. Please answer the evaluation questions that have popped up on your screen. You should see them on your screen. You can just take a moment to answer those questions so that we can close the evaluation. Thank you. Next question.
The next question is, I am a college student who's interested in advocating for youth in care. How can I do that on my college campus?
That question is for Jasmine first, and then I think Ose and may have additional information.
If you're in New York State, you can apply to our FISA Youth Advocate Program, and that will probably be starting sometime in the fall.
What I've found some campuses have done is started a foster youth group. The foster youth group is run by youth, obviously youth that are in care, but everything, the whole structure is a president, vice president, a secretary, and this group meets. Usually it's housed within a department. I know some have been within academic support services and meet regularly, and it's been very, very powerful because not only was it just for them to get together, but just to discuss issues and advocacy and everything, and what's going on the campus, and on raising awareness to youth that are in care. It's been very powerful for a few campuses that have started a group like that. And I think that, one place to start is, maybe within the department, kind of gaining some support to have a space to meet, and then kind of reaching out to other youth in care to meet regularly and talk about some of the issues that you would like to bring to the forefront. It's been powerful on a lot of campuses, and I've had an opportunity to meet some of these young people, and it's amazing. It continues to grow.
The next question is, does foster care let the foster youth know about these additional resources, and that they should let their college know as soon as they decide where they are going to be attending?
Maria, can you read the question again, please?
Certainly. Does foster care let the foster youth know about these additional sources or resources, and that they should let their college know as soon as they decide where they are attending?
That's a great question, and I'll answer that question. I will say that generally speaking, foster care agencies or social workers are endeavoring to provide as much information as possible to support foster youth while they are making that transition to post-secondary education. However, that is for young people that are still in foster care while they're making that transition. We do have some students that leave foster care earlier on, maybe at 13 or 14, who are still eligible to claim independence from their parents and would qualify for many of these foster care resources. And so those young people may or may not have access to counseling while they are going through their college application process. And so we really encourage folks to share this guidebook with High School Counselor Association and other colleagues that are in relevant fields to promote this information, so that we can ensure that all students have access to the most reliable information. And I'd like to just pass it over to Jasmine to provide one more update related to financial aid access for foster youth.
Hi, everyone. So thank you. I just wanted to update on Thursday, July 9th, the U.S. Department of Ed released some guidance that allows some flexibility for foster youth who previously may have been required at their prospective schools to provide proof of non-filer forms or certain IRS tax documentation. They've released some guidance, and I'm going to just drop the link to this guidance in the chat for your usage. But this is really good news because this held up a lot of our youth from getting their financial aid packages, those who are applying to their first year of college, or those who are returning. So this is really good news, and dropping it in the chat now.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. So that is helpful information. We will be sure to include that information on the guide resource webinar, and we are also happy to provide you all, particularly financial aid officers, access to this information, as we know that many students are going through the financial aid verification process right now, and if they were not required to file taxes in the previous year, may have some trouble accessing a non-filer's form. So thank you for that update, Jasmine, and that advocacy. We appreciate it. I'd like to just thank everyone for their time today, and we really appreciate everyone's help in spreading the word about the Foster Youth College Success Resource Guide. As you can see, this little document here is I guess like it's a link that you can include on your website to feature information about the guide on your website. We encourage you to use that photo to share information about the guide on social media platforms, or to create a newsletter, or promote foster youth stories at your college campuses. If you are interested in hosting a specific webinar around supporting foster youth to attend college, or any information around the Foster Youth College Success Initiative itself, or other tools about the resource guide, you can send any referrals or webinar referrals to fysa@children'saidnyc.org email, and they will respond to your requests. As mentioned, this is the 4th webinar in a series of 5. Our 5th and final webinar is a guide navigation for higher education staff, which is really actually a best practice program model guide highlight for higher education staff. We will be presenting 2 best practice models in New York State that support foster youth with attending college. We'll be presenting information on the CUNY programs, as well as a program model at Stony Brook University within the SUNY system. And we encourage you all to join and learn about ways you can develop your own foster youth program at your college campus to support foster youth. If you would like to access information from any of the previous guides, you can visit the College Success Guide website, where you can find the previous webinars. The live webinars are recorded and linked on there, as well as links in any of the documents or resources that we mentioned. I know that there were questions about the Foster Youth College Success Initiative Guide itself, and that is the 2nd webinar in the series, and that is a webinar that was presented in partnership with New York State Education Department, with SUNY and CUNY, where we go through the step-by-step process to accessing College Success Initiative dollars for foster youth. Thank you all again for attending today's webinar presentation. We really appreciate your time. We encourage you to visit the guide, and we hope that you have a wonderful day.